He separates. He's to the 20, to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Florida State. Warwick done on third down.
Winky looking Winky. Wants to throw the knockout punch to Warwick. Warwick open. Touchdown. He did a touchdown. He did catch it. Touchdown, Florida State. Oh, Peter Warwick, how'd you do that?
Kermit Whitfield to the left side. A hole to the 30. Kermit Whitfield 30 to the 20. 15, 10, 5. Touchdown FSU. Kermit Whitfield. A 100-yard touchdown.
Here's the snap. Winston rolling right. Throws the pass on the other.
It's caught. It's caught. It's caught. Touchdown FSU. Kelvin Benjamin.
We're doing it for everybody. We're doing it big all over the country, all over the world. And I'm proud. I'm proud to say I'm a Florida State Seminole.
This is the Garnet and Old Podcast with your hosts, Ryan Eastman and Vince Ciccarelli. With your hosts, Ryan Eastman and Vince Ciccarelli. With your hosts, Ryan Eastman and Vince Ciccarelli. Welcome to the Garnet and Old Show. Another season. I'm Ryan. That's Vince. How you doing today, sir? Welcome to the Garnet and Old Show.
We get some echo.
Another season. Hey, listen, I can tell you this. We got a lot of echo. Vince, what are we doing?
We get some echo.
Another season. Hey, listen, I can tell you this. We got a lot of echo. Vince,
Fixed.
oh, there we go. Well, listen, we were really going for the.
We didn't have any shows for a while, and now we're going to do double show.
We were acting like we had a lot of fans on that reverb, so it was like people were talking around us when really it's just us.
Yeah, it's all this newfangled technology we're trying to do here.
How's it going, Vince? Welcome to another season of the Garnet and Old Show.
It's going pretty well. Ryan and I have been off for a while, but we're back, and actually we're back in a big way. We're going to be streaming live every week on Tuesdays at 7. At the request of our tens and hundreds of fans.
It is, and actually in the hundreds, which we are very pleased. We are excited to have each and every one of you here. Another season. We have some big news we want to talk about, both in the Florida State sphere and the Garnet and Old Show arena. So it's going to be an exciting year, Vince. And I think we want to start off the show with the big announcement and the big bang, which is Jeff Cameron joined the show. A little earlier this week, we had a recorded conversation with Mr. Cameron. For those of you who don't know, he hosts the a big podcast in Tallahassee. Yeah, he hosts the Jeff Cameron Show, formerly of ESPN Radio. He hosts the War Chant live show every single day. And we got him to join the show to talk about a whole list of topics. We also got him to join to enjoy Vince's technical difficulties. In the middle of the interview, Vince's internet just decided to quit on him.
Listen, if you know anything about me, you know that if there is a problem that's going to happen with technology, it's going to happen to me. So yeah, the internet went out for the first time in 5 years, and it happened during our interview with Jeff. So you'll get to enjoy that as well. But we'll go ahead and play it here, Ryan. And for those of you that are joining in, this is an interview we'd had with Jeff about a week ago. But I don't think we talked about anything that would be no longer newsworthy. So I think we did a good job there.
A lot of the stuff that you missed while you were offline, Vince, was newsworthy stuff, including talking about Florida State, potentially the future of them leaving the ACC and what that looks like, which is a very valid topic, which we will talk about after we go through this clip. But for all of you at home, we're really excited. Enjoy the conversation that we had with Jeff Cameron.
Those were your discussions. Those were your talking.
We start at the beginning.
We have a very special guest here today. You can listen to him weekly on 93.3 and on War Chant TV on YouTube. Jeff Cameron joins the show today. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's good to be with you, gentlemen.
It's exciting to have you here, Jeff. You and I were talking a little bit off air that you and I both went to school at the same time. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of similar memories that we probably shared, not together necessarily, but in that time frame. So I'm excited to hear and talk to you today. And Ryan, thank you, Ryan, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be here, Ryan, Vince. Yeah, man, it's always fun to talk Florida State and remembrances, if you will. And yeah, those those years in the 90s, early 90s, we couldn't have known it, Vince, but we were in the golden era, man. We were watching a team that was going to go on to be the decade's best, them in Nebraska, really. And it's just, it's crazy to think about how consistently dominant, Florida State was in those days. I remember going into Joe Campbell and thinking to myself, you were predicting how bad the score was going to be most days. Like, will we win by 50 today? Will they care enough to win by 60 today? Will they run it up? What do we have to do to make sure that we stay number one? Just like those were your discussions. Those were your talking points.
That's correct. And I didn't think we could lose. I was naive. Like, I was new to it, and we were just winning and kicking ass constantly. Yeah. And so when we went to LSU that year, that was kind of the beginning of the end of that season. And then the Miami game, I don't think I got out of bed for days.
It's funny, those Miami games back then, it felt like life and death. And it's because, you just had no perspective. We're at that age, for anybody listening to this, if you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old and you're in college or you're just out of college or you love Florida State, whatever the reason that you're listening, and you think about the games and the magnitude of the games and the seasons, and when you're 21 years old, there's no way for you to have any perspective. You haven't done much. You haven't lived for very long. And I didn't know that. I would hear old people say that, and I would roll my eyes at them and call them old and think like they don't understand what it means to be passionate. They don't know what it is. And of course they did understand. They were once that too, but they had perspective, and they've seen teams that were terrible. So they were going to really enjoy these really good teams. And if they lost a game here or there, it wasn't the end of the world to them. For us, though, it felt like it was everything. You can't lose that game to that team.
And we did. And it was miserable.
Meanwhile, you have Tom and I, who are the exact same age, Tom Lang and I. Yeah. And, we got to see the glory days of Drew Weatherford and Xavier Lee just doing a whole lot of losing. Yeah. And a lot of Chukwuka Jenajay burned on another play. And,
oh, my God.
And so when I finally gained that wisdom getting out of college, my late 20s, mid 20s to late 20s, and we started winning again, it was like a breath of fresh air, because all I remember at most was maybe going to a few games with my dad growing up in the 90s. He was an alumni 91 to 93, and he would tell me things, and I even went to a bar as like I think a 11 or 12-year-old with him to watch the national championship in 99. But as a kid, you're just kind of hanging out with your dad. You're not really locked in. I got locked in middle school and beyond, and all that was a whole lot of losing, and from Chris Ricks all the way to Xavier Lee, it was a whole lot of nothing. But
lost decade.
How lucky are we? I mean, this goes right into kind of what we're going to start talking about, which is the state of the program right now. It's so refreshing, especially, maybe we'll bring it up a little bit later with the basketball team kind of struggling, and we're usually locked in this time of year. Mm-hmm. But how nice it is that we have a 10-3 program going into next season instead of a 5-6 team. Because I'll be honest with you, if we were 5-6 last year in football and the basketball team was doing this bad, I would just be depressed. Just depressed.
We'd all be waiting on baseball is what you'd be waiting, and it is brutal. And in some ways, I am really excited about baseball, of course. But yeah, man, that was our reality for a long time, and it was weird because even in the lost decade, which those were tough years, and we weren't watching 5-7 teams. We weren't, the straight up losing and not making bowls, and the season being over 2 weeks into the season, or 3 weeks into the season. That was unique and brutal to have to go through. And, I do some work sometimes for On3. I'll work with Nebraska and I'll work with Tennessee and a couple other programs just as a driver of shows that they do. And I'll speak to their insiders. And, when you talk to people at Nebraska, and I was thinking this when we were going through it, those people never thought that this would be their lot in life. That, here they would be 20 years removed from relevance, and they were routinely having seasons where you're like, well, looking like 3-9, boys. I mean, that is tough to take. And so the reason I bring that up is when Norvell came in those first 2 years and he was behind the 8 ball because of COVID and everything else, I started to get a little nervous. I started to think, if you stay down too long, it gets tougher and tougher to come back. It gets tougher and tougher to remember those days when you were a prominent program, a perennial top 10 program. And the harder it is to convince the next wave of kids that your relevance is just around the corner. And I remember thinking, man, he's got to win. This past year was a crucial year because I think, like you guys, I don't think any of us wanted to start over. You can't keep starting over. We see the programs, I just named them, that do this all the time, right? You keep firing guys and then you're paying them when they're not even working. And then you get the new guy in here and he's got to start all over again. And that process is never easy. And if he doesn't get it to get on track right away, then you fire him and you do it again. And you just can't keep doing that. And so I was worried that if Mike didn't win last year, even though I think he's a very good coach, that there would just be too much weight, too much momentum going the other way for him to overcome if he didn't establish a winning culture this past year. And he did. And we don't have to worry about it. And now he's got all the positive momentum in the world because right now the caliber of kid that is looking to come to Florida State is much greater. And It's because of that season. It's because of the buy-in and because of that season.
I'm glad you brought that up. So, you're living in town there. You're covering the team all the time. I mean, you're just living and breathing it. What is it about, in your opinion, what is it about Norvell and the staff?
Consistency. Mike has never wavered. Like the things that he teaches and the things that he preaches to them about, even in the face of a loss to Jacksonville State, even in the wake of, and I hate to bring that up, but even in the wake of some of the more difficult moments on the wrong end of lopsided beating to Miami the one year, whatever it might be, Mike never really changed who he was, how he practiced, how he talked to them, how he approached them, the fundamentals that he believed in terms of being accountable for each other. And so I think kids see that and realize that his message is rooted in something that he believes in, that is real. It's not just a slogan. It's not a campaign. It's not a thing that you say because it makes a good soundbite. He believes it. He believes you have to go about your day and your life as a college athlete a certain way. And at some point, those guys, I think, began to realize, okay, this is real. I'll do this. I'll buy in. But they needed to have some success.
Right.
If they hadn't won at some point, even if you believe in that guy, you do start looking around like, I'm doing all the things he's telling me to do, and we're 3 and 4 years in and we haven't had a winning season. Like if that was the way it played out, it gets harder to sell it, even if it's real. So I'm really glad because I believe in the things that he believes in, and I think he's right. And I admired that he was consistent, and his messaging, it really does, to me, the ripple effect is that all of his coaches are in line with that in lockstep, and they preach it too. So it's not just the head coach. If you watch position coaches coach this team, and we get the chance to do that thanks to his open door policy, we're down on the field. I'm watching Atkins with the offensive lineman. I'm watching Odell with the defensive lineman. We hear Ron. All of the coaches, all of them, they're all very consistent. They're all in lockstep with that message, the way we do things, how we practice, how we prepare each and every day. And I think that's gone a long way. And now that they're winning and they see the fruits of their labor, I think it's just strengthened that bond even more.
It's an accelerator when you win, for sure. And I believe that. It makes my heart feel happy to hear those words. So, and the players are regurgitating the same thing. I think Jamie Robinson just tweeted something the other day about how this man was the same every day, and that's why he is who he is.
Yeah, it's great when these former players, these guys that have been through a lot, these guys that were here before he got here and they saw how bad things were, or guys that decided to take a chance based on they believed in what Norvell was telling them when he talked to them in the transfer portal, and said, look, guys, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm not going to make any promises. I'm not going to just tell you what you want to hear. This is what you'll have to do to meet our criteria. But this part I will promise, if you do those things, you'll be a better football player. You'll elevate your stock. If playing at the next level is what you want to do, and most of the guys, that is certainly what they want to do. Norvell has said, believe in what we're doing and understand it's going to be hard, But to hear those guys come out the other side and praise the staff and praise the program, well, that goes a long way. More than anything I could say, it goes a long way when those players say it. And you've got a lot of guys now who are openly tweeting and posting on Instagram and doing those kinds of things. It's a good look for Mike Norvell. And I think it, obviously to me, that reverberations of that are the players that are thinking about transferring, the players that are thinking about coming in. Like, where do I want to go? Well, it seems everybody that goes to Florida State comes out the other side feeling pretty good about their experience.
Yeah, for sure. And it's timing is so funny. College football sometimes is so funny how things line up or don't line up, right? We talk all the time about the big three in Florida not being on the same level at the same time. But in this case, I mean, you're looking at these too early preseason, and we're top 5 consistently on polls all of a sudden, and that feels almost too soon, a little weird, a little like, oh, like we went from unranked, not even in the preseason idea last year to 4, and it makes you a little like, I don't know how I feel about that so far. It's great, but like, is it too early? But it's so funny how it lines up with, the whole debacle with the $14 million at UF, and down in Miami, the offensive system, it's like we know what that's going to look like, and it's kind of fun when you're on the come up and everyone else is kind of having some internal issues. Isn't that so funny how it works out?
It's awesome. It's you have to remind yourself of it when you're on the wrong end of the timing, but when you're benefiting from those moments, and you kind of make your own luck a little bit there. They've worked really hard and gotten into a position. A lot of guys sacrificed a lot. I think about a guy like Jordan Travis who, I could have never guessed Jordan Travis was going to reach the level that he did a year ago. Not from watching him the previous year. There was no evidence. There was no evidence that was coming. As a passer, now you knew he could make people miss, and you knew he was electrifying, and you knew he had a big heart, and you knew he was a hard worker. Those things are all true, and they were true then. But as a passer, in rhythm, pre-snap reads, seam throws, timing, all that stuff, he elevated his game by leaps and bounds, and that's just through hard work. And I got to give him all the credit in the world. That just opens the door to this offense even more. And
it's all of it.
It's
crazy, it's all of it, because he can't do that if he's getting clobbered all the time. So I mean, all the pieces, Alex Atkins bringing in, incrementally better every time, and now look where we are. Now we've got guys running up in an elevator on the video protecting Jordan Travis when they do the schedule reveal. So
Jeff, I have to know, what's your favorite schedule reveal out of all those videos? What was your favorite one?
I like Johnny Wilson's a lot. That was really, really good with the motorcycle. But the one we just referenced was hilarious. I loved it. It was subtle. I like subtlety. So that was good. It was just like
I appreciate
those guys staring.
Yeah.
Who was it? The one in the center, I guess. He just peeked around the corner so he could get his face on the video. It was so funny.
Yeah. I like the one, the Jameis Winston squinting at the footage.
That was really good. Have you seen the ACC? I mean, good on them for, whoever's idea it was for all the programs to do these videos. It was smart. It got good publicity. And the creativity in a lot of these are fantastic. Our guys did an awesome job. Florida State did an awesome job.
Yeah.
The one with Duke making fun of Dabo's entrance running in, how good is that?
The crab legs.
It was great.
Oh, the crab legs. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But those were the worst looking crab legs I have ever seen.
Unseasoned. They were just dry in a bowl. You're like, what are we doing?
They were like plastic. They were and they might have been plastic.
Yeah, they might have been. Yeah, but good on the ACC, which really doesn't do a lot of things very well.
No.
For getting that one right. That was good.
Speaking of the ACC, this is a perfect time to bring this up. So we had the article the other day saying FSU $10 million revenue, right? And that's up from 7 last year. So it's an increase, but it's still not much. And then you War Chant TV actually this morning did a whole story on the ratings being, through the roof for FSU, and we're the highest rating team in the ACC, and consistently one of the best 2 at least. What do you think that does from an optics standpoint? The improvement on the field, the ratings always high. Does that improve our chances to be one of those teams selected to, Big Ten, SEC? Does that help?
Jump ship.
Yeah, it certainly can't hurt. I think, and you'll notice that. Michael Alford doesn't hesitate to tweet those kinds of things, right? I mean, it's almost like it's an audition, and he's saying, "Hey guys, not for nothing, we're one of the most popular teams in the country." And listen, I does it help us? Perhaps, but I do think we're in an untenable bind with the granted rights situation, and this isn't that close to being resolved. So it would be one thing if you were 2 or 3 years away from that contract running out, and you could kind of maybe force the issue where they would want to get something in return if they knew you were leaving, almost like a free agent to be, where, a lot of times teams who can't afford, look, I root for the Pittsburgh Pirates. They can't afford to keep anybody ever. Well, if a player is emerging and they've got a year or two left in the contract and they know they can't afford them, well, they're going to let the league know, hey, Garrett Cole's for sale, guys. Give us your 6 best prospects and he's yours, and that kind of thing. Well, I think if Florida State were close to something like that, where the ACC is like, we're going to lose Florida State, we might as well get something for them. Let's see if we can negotiate a buyout here and let them go early. But it's so far removed from that happening. Like, what's it, 2034 or something like that? You're probably stuck here for another few years at least, unless they continue to expand. I mean, I know people hate it, but I'll be honest with you. The best thing that could happen to Florida State is that the SEC and the Big Ten continue this bidding war of trying to up the purse for a TV product, right? By having lock, stock, and barrel the best product available to college football viewers. And when the Big Ten decided to add USC right away, like, you are on the heels of the SEC adding Oklahoma and Texas, and, you watched UCLA and USC, and you're thinking, okay, well, where does this end? Does the Big Ten try to come after Oregon? Do they go after Washington? At that point, would the SEC say, okay, you want to do that? We're going to grab Clemson and Florida State. Yeah. And, I feel like that would be something you could do.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think about going forward for Florida State to be in the ACC, some of the positive things that are happening in this next season. We're going to see the first time ever where, there won't be ACC, Coastal and Atlantic. And I think that does help. That does help a little bit, make it more interesting because man, those ACC championship games have been a tough thing to watch. And how many times have we seen, I truly believe this year, if we had been in next year's format this year, I mean, how cool would it have been to see Florida State Clemson in the ACC championship, even though we're in the same division, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why you saw when the schedule came out what you saw, which is that they scheduled that Clemson game a lot earlier. A lot of people didn't like that, but I kind of had a heads up that was going to happen. And I think, by the way, Florida State lobbied for it. Frankly, I think both programs did, because you don't want to play a team, of the caliber of Clemson or them play us and then turn around and have to do it again 3 weeks later. So, they weren't going to schedule it later in the year.
And technology being such a wonderful thing, it looks like we lost Vince, but we're going to continue rolling on, just you and I, until Vince gets back on. There he is.
Well, look at that. It's the internets. The internets.
And now we have 2 Vinces. One that's a black screen.
One that's that's hilarious.
If I could really do that in real life, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Be a
that
multiple
would be
play.
awesome.
So Jeff, this is a great leading question. So you were there preseason 2013.
Yeah.
It's fair to say in that 2012, 2013, 2014, the expectation was like at minimum win the ACC, but really looking towards potential national championship implications. Does this for you, this preseason, with the expectations next year being, real expectations are playoffs, right? Does it feel similar to 2013 to you, or is it a different feel because of the circumstances around it?
Yeah, it doesn't feel the same.
Okay.
And people aren't going to want to hear that. I don't think it feels the same because I don't think Florida State's depth of talent is where it was in 2013. 2013, you had literally NFL players at every position, offensively and defensively. I don't think Florida State has that at linebacker right now. I don't think they have it. The depth of it in the secondary either. I think they're a vastly improved product. I think the offense is going to be electrifying. I think they're a really good football team that could make the college football playoff.
Yeah.
But I also think that it would be a mistake to assume that they are on the road to a national championship. I don't, it's weird that you can be a playoff team and not be a legitimate national championship contender, because the two don't, that doesn't jive. Like if you're going to say somebody's a playoff contender, then they're a national championship contender.
Yes.
But we do know there are different levels of contenders. Ask TCU.
That was a tough one. That was tough to watch.
Yeah. So, like, was TCU a great story? Did they deserve to be there? Yes. Was it awesome to see? Yes. Was it good for college football? I think so.
Mhm.
They didn't look like they belonged on the same field as Georgia, because athlete for athlete, they weren't close. They weren't close.
Yes.
And I feel like Florida State is kind of a version of TCU right now. Really good, fun team. Any given day can compete with anybody. But if we get right down to it, player for player and depth of talent, I don't think Florida State's at the same place that Ohio State's at or that Georgia's at.
Yeah.
So
No, and that's the one thing that worries me. You see all these articles being written about Florida State, and maybe justly because of the season we just had, but there's a whole lot of FSU's roster is loaded. You know, you've heard ESPN analysts write articles about, hey, we're loaded for this year, but we're loaded from returning talent that was developed by Mike Norvell's staff. We're loaded by some transfer portal guys that, although might not be the five-star athletes, but they were very good at what they did in other conferences, and they're coming to Florida State. But the only concern I have looking forward to this year is, although we are loaded from a depth standpoint, that top end is not Georgia or Clemson yet. Can we beat Clemson and compete with Clemson? Sure. But that's a one-off game. If you got to a national championship, if Florida State was in that game against Georgia, we would have lost, maybe not as brutally and destructively, but I firmly believe that's a 14-point game minimum for Georgia.
Easy.
Yep.
I completely agree, by the way.
Yeah.
I really think, welcome back, Vince.
Gosh.
I really think that's exactly right. I think Florida State, and he froze again. Oh,
Froze again. You know what? This is live TV, and this is how it goes. That's why we just keep rolling on Big River, as you would say,
fine.
Jeff.
We'll keep talking. Vince is just missing out on a good conversation.
Yeah.
No, so I believe we would have gotten housed. Ryan, I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to be judicious in this. I think we would have gotten housed.
Yeah.
And I don't think we could have blocked Georgia.
Yeah.
So it would have been a long day. So, you know, and that thing snowballed on TCU, and we all know how these things can happen. I'm not saying Florida State would have lost 60 whatever to 7, but I am saying that Georgia is a much better football team than Florida State. Now, my cohort, Corey Clark, who's a Georgia alum, will tell you that, hey, I watch Georgia every week, Jeff. That's not true. Florida State could beat Georgia. Kentucky played him close, and, you know, Missouri almost beat him. And I'm like, Corey, have you forgotten what it's like to cover dominant championship-level teams that are fresh off of a championship?
Yeah.
Sometimes they go through the motions. Sometimes they're not intense and focused the way they should be, because, you know, it's hard to maintain that every week for kids. But once they got into the playoff and once they had to ratchet it up, in truth, the national championship game was the previous game.
Yes.
You know, the game against Ohio State that had like talent, and they probably should have lost that game. Ohio State outplayed them for the better part of 3 quarters. But they had the requisite skill level and physicality and talent to rise up when they had to.
Yeah.
And then it was like they must have watched that film on TCU and thought, we're going to beat the bejesus out of this team. And I really think Kirby did a good job of getting them to focus and got them into that mindset of domination. Mike Norvell has done a very good job with this program and this team, getting them to compete at a very high level, getting them to believe in themselves. They've done enough winning now this past year to probably have the kind of confidence that's necessary to beat up on most of the teams on this schedule. This upcoming schedule is weak.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
Let's be honest. You've got the LSU game. You've got the Clemson game. There'll probably be one more in there that's going to be a tough game. We never know who. Maybe Pitt's decent this year. That game on the road in November could be tough. Maybe Florida gets their act together. I don't know, but that is a road game at the end of the year, and it's a rivalry. But the truth is, the other teams on this schedule, if we're taking that next step of being an elite or a top 10 type team, you got to run roughshod over these guys. The Virginia Techs of the world aren't good. Let's just not kid ourselves. Wake lost a ton.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason that we shouldn't win a lot of games very comfortably this year.
Yes.
And I think they will.
I think what you said about TCU, though, is interesting because don't you think in the 12-team future playoff scenario that never ends up being the national championship? You can have a great story like TCU win one-off game. And I feel like any team in the country can have a amazing one-off game that gets them into a playoff scenario or a national championship. But the idea in the 12-team playoff is that they would have to have played more than that. And that eventually I think that weeds out a lot of the pretenders instead of contenders.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do. Again, I think it was a great story. That's why it was interesting that we're sitting here talking about where is Florida State. Are they more like TCU or are they like that Georgia team? Well, I think they're somewhere in the middle of that. I think they're better than TCU. If we played them on a neutral side, I like Florida State in that game. I think it'd be a really good game. And I don't like us against Georgia in any way, shape, or form. I think we'd get dominated. So,
2013 FSU would have kicked our own asses.
Oh, 2013 FSU would dominate this team. 2013 FSU would dominate this team. Now, again, that's okay because everything's a stage. You got to build up to that. We're trying to sprint and we just started crawling. So, and what I mean by that is I'm aware of our illustrious history, obviously, but the recent history is anything but illustrious. It's been terrible.
Yep.
And so you've got to stockpile elite level players in recruiting class after recruiting class. We haven't been able to do that. We've hit home runs in the transfer portal. Great job for a staff that had to find guys that could plug and play right now and start winning games.
Yeah.
But they have not stockpiled elite classes in the high school ranks where you're developing guys through the 2 and 3 years in the program before unleashing them on the rest of the ACC and the rest of college football.
Yeah.
That's the next step. And that's how you build those championship contenders like Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State, where everywhere you look is an NFL guy.
Yeah, and this is the first, you look at the next year's recruiting rankings. It's the first time we're in that top 5 recruiting rankings all of a sudden because it's proof of concept last year leading into this year. But, going into – we know we have a good amount of depth and a good amount of talent in transfer. So, Jeff, headed into this spring, I think we're all really excited, not just curious. Last year I was curious. How are they going to look? How are they going to respond? So tell me, what are you looking forward to, man? Spring season's right around the corner. It won't take too long to be here.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the first time in a long time that I'm truly pumped to watch the competition in spring football. Ryan, Vince, this is going to be a bloodbath, man. You've got guys of a high caliber competing for starting reps at a lot of positions. And that is ideal. We all know that practices need to be harder than the games. Practices have to be the intense competition that helps shape your starters and gets you to a place where you really realize what you have, and I think in years past, we've had a couple of position groups here and there where we'd say, oh, that's going to be a good competition. But we didn't have enough around every segment group to say, hey, that's anybody's battle. I look at that offensive line and what they've done, the returning starters, the guys that were the backups, and then what they brought in. You're going to have a fight for that right tackle spot. You're going to have a fight for the center spot. You're going to have a fight for the guard spot. The competition will be intense, and the same goes for the defensive line now. You have enough bodies there. They're all fighting for more reps. They want to be on the field when we're winning games.
Of course.
And so that will be a battle, and I think you get that in a lot of places. So offensively, that's a deep backfield, obviously. Those running backs are going to be competing to see who gets second-team reps behind Benson because we know Benson's going to be the guy. Yeah. The receivers, same type thing. So to me, this is the first time in a long time that we're watching spring football. We're watching, these practices, and there will be a level of intensity. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some fights. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw that thing get ratcheted up. And that's fine. That's the way it should be. It should be an ugly, ugly thing on a daily basis in practice where guys are just getting after each other.
What do you know? We have some tight ends. We have tight ends now, huh?
Miracle. Vince, what were you going to say?
I said we need more fights. That's what we need. We need more fights on the field. That's how you know you're getting to the point because the guys are chippy. The only position that I think is doesn't have the depth that you guys are, that I missed the whole talk about that, but the linebacker core, right? So that's the one. So if someone goes down there, we got a problem.
We do, and I was hoping, and I know it's a delicate matter for a lot of reasons that we can't get into here. I was hoping they were going to bring in an upper echelon linebacker to help secure depth there. I don't know that they necessarily wanted to do that this year. I think they will next.
Yeah.
But, now they did bring in a freshman in Nicholson, who I think is going to be really, really good, but he is just a freshman. So he'll play some this year, guys. He's got a body that's ready for it, and he's an elite athlete. He was a two-way guy, and I believe he can play, but he's not – you can't rely on a freshman to provide elite level depth. So, I think those veterans, they are a little bit beholden to, and you got to be careful when you're orchestrating your roster through the transfer portal, because that's cool here and there when you just don't have guys. But when you have two starters, if you bring in an elite level player at that position, and these guys have been loyal to you and they've worked hard with you since coming over, you can upset the apple cart a little bit. So I think it's weird. You just have to kind of navigate that a little bit. I think next year they will bring in somebody if they have to and not worry about hurting feelings. There are some positions where you don't care if the incumbent starter gets pissed or not. Because, tough luck. You're not good enough. We're not really worried about you. But other positions, you got to be a little bit careful with.
Right.
Jeff, I want to know, and this is just the last thing I have for you before I ask Vince if he has anything else. So the Jeff Cameron Show is home of just thousands of funny clips that from Jimbo's era, from even some Willie stuff. Mike doesn't give you those kind of sound bites, right? Mm-hmm. So do you think, and I hope not, please don't ever stop those old clips, because I think everyone, it's like a cult thing right now. Like I like them, those kind of things. They're fantastic. So over the years, you've been doing this a long time.
23 years.
How do you feel going into now? And I wonder if there was any thought of you ever, like, when you were leaving the last radio station and coming over to War Chant and everything, I am curious if there was ever a thought like you were going to not do the Jeff Cameron Show ever again, or if that was never even considered. But how do you feel about 23 years of doing this? Because it must have been fun, right?
It's been awesome. I pinch myself all the time, man. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I mean that. I fell into a career. I didn't think I was going to do this. I was on the verge of moving back to Tampa or moving to Tampa. My parents were in St. Pete at the time, and I was thinking about going back there. I was working for a long time. I worked as a counselor for Appalachian Center for Human Services when I was in school, and I didn't want to go back to school. I was not a dedicated student. I just was not disciplined, and if I'm being honest, and so I didn't want to have to go get a master's, which is what I would have had to do to make any money in the field that I was in. And so a buddy of mine, I owe him the world. I tell him this all the time. We were having a beer together, and he said, "Man, you should be a sports talk radio host." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I'm serious." He goes, and he was really nice. These were his words, and I'll never forget it. It was very complimentary. It was almost maybe uncomfortable. He goes, "You're a funny guy. You're very opinionated. You got a good voice. You played a year of college football. You know the sport. Why don't you go do that, man? There's all these yahoos that are doing it. You should try it." And I said, "How do I get into radio? I don't know how to get into radio." But he planted the seed. And then that kind of got me thinking, maybe I could do this. And I will tell you, when I first started in radio, the first time that I sat behind a microphone, I was doing a sports update for this station, and it was like 30 seconds, guys. That's all I had. I had 30 seconds to give the scores, the local scores, like Greensboro and Sneeds and all these little places, right? I'm naming scores from the high school games. And it was such an adrenaline rush when the red light turned on and it was my turn to speak. And the host of this other show, it wasn't even a sports show. It was sort of a hodgepodge pop culture show, and some politics, some music, some sports. And they cut to me to go and to do this. And I'm in the same room with them, and the red light comes on and I have to do it. And I remember walking out of that studio thinking, well, I want to do this.
Right.
I want to do this. This is really fun. And then the more I did it, the more I learned how not to do the things that would get you kicked off the air, and how to phrase things and parse things in order to present it in a way. And then they gave me more freedom to inject opinions and that kind of stuff. And so here we are 23 years later, and there's been a lot of guys that have been instrumental and having the Jeff Cameron Show be on the air. I've had tremendous producers, co-workers that, I mean, there's too many to name here, but I've had so many great co-workers over the years and people that helped with the maturation of the show and gave me great ideas. And so, yeah, I didn't think I would ever be doing this, but I'm thankful every day that I am. It is an awesome job. I do not deny that. I am incredibly fortunate. I've been able, guys, to cover Super Bowls, Stanley Cup Finals, NBA, you name it. I've done all those things. I mean, I was down on the field at the Rose Bowl back-to-back years, standing down there watching the team warm up. I'm walking around. I mean, it was incredible. I would look around and like, there's the San Gabriel Mountains, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is insane. I'm in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, and they can't kick me out. I'm here. It was amazing. So, yeah, those kinds of things. It's never lost on me how fortunate. I mean that sincerely.
Well, I could tell you. I mean, myself, I started listening to your show, in the early 2010, 2011, 2013, all the way up. And, the second I started listening to it every week back then, mostly on radio, on the old radio station, the moments, the suck it Clemson, those are the things that people remember. Those are moments that you will always forever be known for. And it's amazing. And I could tell you, it's those kind of moments that take people like Vince and I, who 3 years ago are sitting around a coffee at work. We worked together before, and just saying, hey, what's in the current environment of YouTube and podcasting? What's stopping us? And 3 years ago, we did it just me and him for fun, for maybe one or two family members that might listen to it. And then you fast forward to last year when we're like, man, we're getting a few hundred listeners here every week. Well, this is a little bit more intense and a little bit more pressure. We feel like we have to prep, because before we were just winging it off the cuff, talking about nothing. Now we're having production meetings last year, and now this year we're talking about, we're going to be doing a live show, hopefully here in Jacksonville, on every away game at a local bar and grill.
That's awesome.
And I'm just, it's almost like it's too quick, but also like can't come quick enough. It's like, why are people listening to us? Is the feeling I feel a lot, like very self-conscious, like there's actually people who care to listen to me, and it's just BS about our favorite sports team, which
you're
is
relatable.
awesome.
Yeah, you're relatable though. I mean, I think the reason, it's a meritocracy a lot of times, being on the air. Like if you're listened to for a reason. People either relate to you, like you, your content's good, you're insightful, funny, whatever it might be. That doesn't happen by accident, because nobody's going to waste their time listening to somebody who sucks. Nobody's going to listen to their time and waste their time. We're all busy people. And so it's like, you can give yourself some credit for that, but also it's obviously wise to understand that just like that, it could be over. So you just, for me, I'm humble enough to know that, hey, look, there are a lot of people that could do what I do. I'm not curing cancer. I'm talking sports and being a sarcastic ass half the time. There are a lot of people that could do that. At the same time, I'm good at what I do, and I know that. And so it's like, okay, you can take some pride. You have a good work ethic. Do you prepare? Do you deliver a show that people want to hear? The numbers will tell you yes or no. Then from there, you keep that other balance and understanding that there are a lot of people that could do it. So, hey, don't take it for granted. Keep doing it, man. Keep growing that audience. Yeah,
and I appreciate it. And to just be honest with you, like, I personally would never listen to a podcast that has a guy with consistent internet issues. I'm just messing with you, Vince. But we've all heard the ones that sound like, we've all, without naming any names, we've seen the podcast that it's bad audio quality, bad video, and it's just, you're almost wondering, like, wow, if these guys can get a following, then why not us? And to be honest with you, I've had 2 or 3 friends come up to me and like, well, how did you guys, like, I'm like, bro, just, you have to start, and you have to do it consistently, and you have to post frequently, and you have to continually improve on your technology and your equipment, and you're not going to get, no one's going to listen to you at first, and you feel like you're talking to an echo chamber, and you got 2 listeners. Before you know it, you have one podcast hit and had one interesting part in it, and people loved it. But you guys, honestly, like War Chant, were the reason that kind of inspired Vince and I to even get started. So I want to say thank you, and I'll kick it over to Vince, because I don't know if he has anything else to say. But Vince, you're really just bringing down the quality of the show today. It's just completely not okay.
Well, I will say that at least my consistency is that I bring the show down. That's what I do. And if the internet is bad, it is. but we've got phones too. So this is a redundant service here now I got going on, and I missed half the chat, but that's okay. But Ryan's right, Jeff. Started listening to you long ago, to the point where my daughter would recite the opening of the show, and she was old at the time because she heard it so many times, right? But but
thank you. Tell her I said I'm sorry.
That's how it happens. That's how it happens. And so we thank you, for spending the time with us on a Sunday.
Sure.
That's just well above and beyond. We really appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed it, fellas, and I appreciate it. And you keep on keeping on and build this thing and have fun with it. Don't forget to have fun along the way. And you know what? It's a good time to be doing it because, again, we've come out the other side. I think we all agree with that. And this chat is primarily centered around the fact that we have expectations, right? That Florida State is about to go through a season where they have something to lose. They're not just striving towards something. They have something to lose. They got to continue to press forward. This year, we were talking about what's a reasonable expectation. Well, I think at some point you got to win the conference here, right? So let's start there. Win the conference. If you win the conference, you got a good chance to be in the college football playoffs. So it'll take care of itself. And you know what, fellas? I'm sure I'll see you there. I hope so, over in Orlando.
Yep.
I'll be there. We're going to broadcast. The whole crew's going to be there for much of that week leading up to the Florida State LSU game at Camping World Stadium. I can't wait for that. I was just there for the bowl game, and I got to tell you, one of the best things about this job is getting to run into so many of your fellow Noles and listeners and, fans of the program, not my program, the football program. And you run into everybody and you're walking the streets together, and it's just incredible. Everybody's pumped, like, hey, we matter again. This is going to be cool. And you can feel that nervous energy. And I'm already excited about that. So it will be a fairly interminable offseason with all these expectations. But you're right. The spring game is going to be awesome. And then I think from there, we'll be counting down the days and making plans to hit the road. So I look forward to running into you guys along the way. And thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on, and we definitely will be there. We renewed our season tickets, I think, both recently, and requested a bunch of tickets for the Orlando game against LSU. And so, and I'll probably see you at the Corner Pocket, hopefully next year.
Absolutely.
But again, thank you so much for coming on. Again, if you don't already know, which most of you probably do, you can listen to the Jeff Cameron Show every single week on traditional radio, local in Tallahassee on 93.3. And you can find War Chant TV on YouTube. And Jeff does a fantastic job, not only having the Jeff Cameron Show live every single week, but also the Sunday Smash, Seminole Headlines, the whole crew. You do a lot, Jeff.
I do a lot, but it's fun to do, and we'll keep doing it. And you can always find the podcast wherever you get podcasts, everybody listens differently now. So there's a lot of avenues by which to catch this show. So I appreciate you promoting that. And it's been fun, fellas. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Be well, Jeff.
Take care, guys.
Vince, you are still consistently bringing down the quality of the show. I just want to throw that out there.
Hey, listen, I only can do what I can do, Ryan. But how cool was that? How cool was that?
I mean, especially for you and I. We've been listening to Cameron for years, so a little bit of meeting your. They say never to meet your heroes, but in this case, Jeff was an awesome dude. He even got me during my graduation for my master's reserved table at a local restaurant. That was a very hard reservation to come on. So thank you, Jeff Cameron, for coming on. Really an honor to have him.
Yeah, and it's our intent for those that are still with us here, and there are quite a few. It is our intent to pull in some interviews every now and then, and some of them will be live, some of them will be pre-recorded, just depending on when those people are available to us. So that was a fantastic time we had there with Jeff.
And before we get into any current events, we have a bunch of announcements that we are going to hold off on announcing, like really cool stuff coming up, especially locally in Jacksonville. However, I do want to say,
we're not going to announce.
Yeah, I do want to say that we plan on doing a live show at a bar and grill to be announced in the future on every away game Saturday coming up in the season. And then we plan on also recording live post game from Doak Campbell after every single game, live in front of the stadium every single game, if at all possible.
This is all correct news, and Ryan is doing a good job not giving all the detail yet because some of the details are still being worked out. But Ryan and I are trying to take Garnet and Old to a youthful level. So we're going to be, like I said at the beginning of the show, streaming every week at 7 on Tuesdays, and then just like Ryan said, some live events, and then trying to get some content out there on days of the game and after the games.
Absolutely. But let's get into something. One thing that came up in the conversation. So I want to, Vince, cover it with you first because it's pressing news. Florida State's in the ACC, but for how long? Let's talk about it.
I mean, hopefully not too long, but we both know that it's going to be longer than we want it to be. And for those of you that are, been paying attention, you know that on Friday last week, the Board of Trustees had a meeting, a very lengthy meeting. And one of the main things that came out of that was some great sound bites of the athletic director, Michael Alford, basically putting the conference on notice to a degree, saying that what's currently happening in terms of the revenue and the way it's distributed to all the teams is not working for us. And there are reasons that it's not working for us. When I say us, I'm Florida State. And one of the main reasons that it's not working for us is because of this. He pointed out, rightly so, that Florida State basically garners 15% of the viewership that the conference reports on, right? So 15% of the viewership is coming from Florida State fans watching our team. Flip side of that, the conference is only distributing 7% of the dollars to us. And so that math, as they say, ain't mathin'. And for many, many years, we've kind of done things in the shadows, complained about things behind closed doors, trying to get the conference to understand where the dollars come from. And, got some friends that go to these other schools. And I'm not trying to be, not trying to poke fun, but people are not watching Wake Forest and people are not watching Duke. They're not bringing in the money we are. And so I think, Ryan, as you know, for years and years and years, we've had an athletic director that didn't really have any kind of, chutzpah to do things like this, and maybe didn't have and maybe didn't have the backing of the administration as well. But we can't. The words he used. It's impossible. It's going to be impossible for us to keep up with our peers when year after year after year, we are $30 million behind. $30 million per year. It's an impossible, untenable situation.
And for those of you who don't follow this stuff very closely, the ACC rights say that whatever TV revenue is brought in by the ACC distribution is evenly distributed amongst all the teams in the ACC, meaning Duke gets the same amount of money from distribution rights as Florida State. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen the many ESPN3 games that Duke is on, but there's about 10 people in the stands, and nobody's watching those games. Meanwhile, those were the average numbers of viewers, Vince, right? I mean, that chart
Absolutely.
per game. So if you take a look at when FSU plays Clemson, we're almost double that, a lot of times. In fact, several times in the last season, there was Florida State has first or second most viewership of all time in this time slot or that day, based on all college football numbers. So we are bringing in so many eyes to the ACC network and the ACC at large, while Duke just gets to basically, Wake Forest, Duke, Virginia, they all get to just coast on our coattails right now.
They do get to just coast. When we joined the conference in '92, I mean, the thought was this was back before there were college football conference championship games. And so, like, a lot of the dollars were coming in at that point based on basketball, like the tournament. And so the thought was at that point, go to ACC. There's a lot of dollars coming in there, and maybe it'll elevate our basketball program, maybe to get on a more even tier. But we all know what's happened since 1992. Alfred talked about this in the meeting. The way the TV networks look at, the way they look at who's bringing in the dollars, they look at it as an 80-20. It's 80% football and 20% basketball. And so while back in 92, Duke and North Carolina and, NC State and all these schools could have said, we're bringing in the dollars because our basketball teams are great. That's not the case anymore. And not only have they been riding the coattails of all the money that Florida State and Clemson have been bringing in, and I want to give them props, right? Because, they were second on the list there. And where Alfred said that we're bringing in 15% of the revenue, Clemson's doing their part. They're bringing in 9%. So the two of the schools together are basically covering 24% of the viewership. And so the rest of these schools, think about it. Wake Forest, how many students do they have, Ryan?
I don't even know. It's a very exclusive school, so not many.
$3 grand, maybe 3,000.
You see it on the sidelines, don't you?
It's like 3,000 maybe, and they're getting the same amount of money that we are. And I tell you one thing they're not doing, they're not putting it into football.
They're putting it into lacrosse and basketball.
Right. So, the gravy train, in my opinion, is what he was saying is the gravy train, we're letting you guys know that this doesn't work for us. And as soon as the moment is possible, everybody find a landing spot, because Florida State is done with, basically carrying the flag and not getting anything in return for it.
One thing, you see a lot of articles this week coming out about what it would take and the money and the grant of rights being the big problem. But what could change all of this, and I want to get into this just quickly, is there's been more news about the Big Ten taking more Pac schools with them. And if they were to bring another 4, which is the rumor right now, into the Pac-10, Pac-10 schools into the Big Ten, and increase their, visibility, the idea is that the SEC might like to counter that with a splash deal outside of the Texas-Oklahoma thing and bring in another 2 schools. And the idea being that this could all change because the ACC's contract exclusive deal is with ESPN. ESPN also owns the SEC network. So there's ways here, in my opinion, with the grant of rights media deals, for ESPN to kind of work behind the scenes and level out how much money is paid out to the ACC or not paid out to the ACC if the SEC really wants 2 teams, being Clemson and Florida State. So it could all change if other conferences start making big moves.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, ESPN's not going to be, hot to, give us more money, give the ACC more money as is, because they've got the sweetest deal that has ever been written. If you want to talk about like the worst contract that's ever been devised, you're looking at it right there, where the ACC is getting a pittance compared to the SEC and the Big Ten. And you can look to see when their contract is going to be up. The ACC's is not up till 2036.
If only we had a time machine, Vince.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So you're right. So if the SEC or if ESPN decided that the Big Ten is making too many moves and Fox and NBC, this is an arms race between those 2 leagues, and it's an arms race between ESPN and Fox, right?
Yep.
As far as sports. So if the Big Ten continues to bolt on teams that are drawing in viewers, because that's what it's all about, then the SEC may say, yeah, we need to get we need to bolster the SEC to
Yep.
mirror what's going on there. And the only other way this could happen, Ryan, and because I think that way with ESPN trying to maneuver things, I think that's least likely. I think what's more likely is that Florida, what happened on Friday, where Alfred basically lets everybody know in the conference that we are not long for this conference.
And everyone else dissolves itself.
And everyone else needs to start making plans. And so if the Pac-12 or Pac-10 or Pac-8, I don't know what they are anymore, if they start looking for teams and, Wake Forest, let's face it, is not going to have a seat at the SEC or the Big Ten, but Wake Forest needs a place to land, right? So Wake Forest needs to maybe look at an offer from a Big 12 or a Pac-12. And if enough of those schools in the ACC that are not in, the Florida State, Clemson, maybe Miami, maybe Virginia, if in that middle tier, if enough of them start to say, hey, we need to make a plan and make it happen quickly, then this grant of rights goes away, because you only need, I say only, you need 8 teams from the conference to basically say we're done here.
And it's dissolved.
And I think that's the spark he's trying to ignite.
And Clemson is doing the same thing behind the scene. Let's be honest. They had a few
And
comments this week that were like, yes, Florida State's bang on. We are also in the same position. I'm sure Miami, even if it's not warranted, probably feels that they should be at some table, which I feel like Miami is going to be the kid set to the kids table that wants to eat at the adults table, but it's Thanksgiving, there's only so many chairs, so they got to eat at the kids table. But I want to take a user question. So Philip in the chat asked, would Notre Dame drop NBC for SEC money and leave basically Florida State hanging without a place to land? I don't see that. And the reason why I don't see that is because the more likely landing spot due to educational alignment would be if the Big Ten came calling for Notre Dame because of their existing affiliation with NBC and Fox. Is a much more likely landing spot where NBC would be cool with them going to the Big Ten. I don't see a Notre Dame SEC alignment. I see a Big Ten Notre Dame alignment.
I mean, and the other thing about that would be that if Notre Dame were to join a conference within a certain time frame, it has to be the ACC.
So you're thinking we would dissolve because of the 8 teams. Notre Dame signs with the Big Ten.
Right. And let's be honest. There's no way Notre Dame is jumping on a sinking ship.
Never.
They were already not going to do it. But this is even clearer now. Like I said, the AD has basically said this conference is not going to exist for the long term.
Yeah, Notre Dame is the dude that goes to summer camp, even though he has a girlfriend back home, and meets a girl at summer camp and tells her he's in love with her and is always going to be with her. But the second the summer camp's over, says, hey, it's just not going to work out. We're going 2 separate ways. Notre Dame has that kind of temporary boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with the ACC. When it works for them and it gets them, some good matchups and primetime matchups, it's great. But the second they think it's over, they're gone and they're not going to the SEC. The SEC is from a lot of this comes down to the Big Ten sees themselves, which I agree as both, yes, an elite athletic conference, but they also see themselves as a premier educational landing spot.
And they are.
They are.
I'm not going to deny that they are, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of people say there is no way that Florida State and Clemson would ever go to the Big Ten, because the Big Ten wouldn't offer that.
Yeah,
but
it's not a good fit.
Well, it's not a good fit in terms of, one of the things they say is they have to be a member of the AAU and all this other stuff. Let me tell you that if it comes about and the Big Ten sees an opportunity to add premier programs in the Southeast,
the AAU
they are going to do it.
Yes.
They are going to do it. The AAU thing is going to be, and by the way, Florida State is working toward that anyway. I mean, yearly, they're constantly climbing up the rankings. But yes, if the Big Ten, if it made sense and they knew that they could get Florida State and Clemson, they would absolutely want a foothold in the Southeast.
We
And
wouldn't
at
prefer
that
it.
point, huh?
We would not prefer it as fans. I think most fans would say it would make more sense to play regionally in the SEC. However, we cannot be mad if the Big Ten tomorrow said, "Come on down, Florida State and Clemson." Although we'd be like, "Oh man, it would have been great to be in the SEC to have those matchups, Southeastern Conference, and be able to travel." At that point, we're just happy to be at the main players table. I mean, one of the two, right? No matter
Yeah, I
what.
mean, yeah, sure. I mean, they're not going to say no to the Big Ten.
hmm
And to be honest, I'll give you my preference is the Big Ten.
I'm actually surprised to hear they say that. I
Yeah.
just for traveling purposes alone, mine would be the SEC.
To me, that doesn't matter. I mean, we're already going to Syracuse,
Well, I'm
right?
not.
Well, I'm just saying we're already going to Boston College. So, and we're already going to Pittsburgh. So I don't think there's a much difference here at all. Now, it would be great if, if the Big Ten is the way that it happens, that Clemson becomes part of that, right? So
Yeah,
you have
sure.
someone a little more regional for that, for sure.
Mhm.
But that's I would prefer the Big Ten. I would prefer the Big Ten because it's almost like to spite, right? Because how many years have we been hearing for decades and decades how there's no way that Florida State or Clemson will ever get in the SEC because of this gentleman's agreement between these other schools? Whatever, you can have your conference, and it doesn't matter to me. I would prefer the Big Ten. But the Big Ten can only do something like that if they're not getting a boat anchor along with it. And that boat anchor along with it is the grant of rights, which basically says Florida State can leave the ACC and pay to leave, but until 2036, all of the revenue from their broadcasts go to the ACC. So that means that Florida State would be bringing nothing to the table.
Yep.
Until that grant of rights is like null and void.
The last thing on this, Vince, bring up the other chart, the revenue chart by viewership.
The first one I showed, or
yes. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's play a game, Vince. Let's do the 8 teams. I'll give you my 8 teams that I think would actually say yes to this, right?
Okay.
Florida State, Clemson, Miami, right off the bat, absolutely, they would all say peace out pretty quickly, right?
For sure.
They are probably right now in back channels doing just that. I think that Syracuse, because of the market up there, would be a good market that another conference would be happy to accept, that New York market. I think that's a nice one, right, for them. I think you then go Virginia Tech and Virginia because of their ties to each other. They can play each other, a rivalry. If they brought both of them in, that would be a good one. And then I would say North Carolina State. And then I have one more, and that would be Vatech. I'm sorry, not Vatech, would be Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Okay. So you're thinking like if we pick 8, then 4 of them go to the Big Ten and 4 of them go to the SEC. Is that kind of the way you're looking at this?
Yeah, the only ones I'm leaving out that would not be interested in leaving the ACC right now, like they want to hold on for dear life, is
Duke.
Boston College, Wake Forest, Duke, and either Louisville or Syracuse.
Yeah. I would say that, Florida State, Clemson, Miami would be ready to like sign on the dotted line right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if it was pretty common knowledge that Virginia and North Carolina had a permanent landing spot, they would sign right now as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 5. The other 3 are where the problem is.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about this earlier today. If the Big Ten had had kind of like master plan, they want a school from North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Then they get UNC,
Hmm.
Clemson, Georgia Tech, and Florida State.
Yes.
That would be, to them, that would be like a complete coup,
Yes.
right? They get a, and I say major name. I'm not talking about the football teams necessarily being good, because Georgia Tech is pretty terrible, and Miami is middling at best. But they're getting some brand names there, right? So and so then where would the other four go then? So the other four, I guess you go Virginia Tech, NC State, then who? Louisville
I would say
to
Louisville
the
from
South,
recent
to the
brand
Southeast
names, and
Conference.
probably Pitt.
Louisville would be a tough stretch for the Big Ten because of the academics.
Pitt would be
The-
an option.
Pitt might be an option, right? But
And to answer
remember,
Philip, academically, what do they want Miami? Yeah, they're a private school. They're
academically, do they want Miami? Absolutely. I
yeah.
think, Miami is a premier, medical school and all that kind of stuff. So from that standpoint, yes. And as this chart shows, they draw a decent amount of viewers.
not
I mean,
live.
that's
But
not at their home stadium, is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
you
But
mean you mean our home stadium.
watch on TV, they'll definitely do that. So yeah, I think they would do that. And so, if you follow my logic there and you go Florida State, Miami, Clemson, and then North Carolina.
Yep.
So that's 4, and then you take Georgia Tech, you take NC State, you take Pitt, and you take Virginia Tech maybe to go to the SEC. I don't know.
And the
But-
other conferences, if they would hope to get picked up, would be from basketball purposes, and that would be if North Carolina didn't go for the Big Ten, Wake Forest, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia. Those would be the teams that would be good basketball pickups for a Big 12.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are, again, nothing's happening tomorrow,
I wish.
but nothing's happening out in the open tomorrow, but there are conversations going on amongst all these schools, I'm sure. And could you imagine, those in the Wake Forest, and I keep bringing them up, or in the Boston College realm or in the Pitt realm, and they're like, how dare Florida State, kind of cry and whine about this? Well, you know what? You've been pocketing money for a decade or more and not doing anything.
Steve Adazio enjoys pastries when he was there, so you got to give him credit there.
That's
All
true.
right,
That's true.
what else are we talking, Vince? Because we're going an hour and 12 minutes. So
Yeah, I
I think
mean,
there's one other topic probably.
well, I mean, there's probably a couple other topics, but we're not going to necessarily get into everything tonight because of the interview we showed.
Yep.
But from a recruiting standpoint, just one thing I want to bring up is that our commitment, Luke Kromenhoek, who was basically an unknown when we offered him, and he was an unknown because he had never taken a high school snap as a starter at the time. He was a backup. He is now risen. He is the number 59 recruit in the country. To me, that I love that because that tells me that
Development.
the staff knows talent, and they're getting on stuff early. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up with that.
That's the old 247 3 to 4 star bump when they commit to Florida State, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And then I think we probably have to just throw this up there as well. That's this is a tweet from John Ruiz, who is the CEO of Life Wallet, who is a major booster for the University of Miami, and he's a clown in a lot of senses of the word because he doesn't choose to do things in the background. It's like all out in the open. You can see here he tweeted this at halftime.
He is careful though. He generally only does this if he knows, and this was the largest comeback in the history of the ACC. The most points anyone's ever coming back from. So when he posted that he's like, okay, there's no way they're coming back from 25.
That's right. So yeah, there's no way that this is going to come back to bite me. And then what we ended up finding out is that it does come back to bite. So it's going to play this real quick.
Little Miami section right here.
Yeah, this is the student section in Miami.
They thought they hit the winning shot right there.
Yeah, let me start again because I forgot to actually put the. There you go.
Shoot it.
They thought they won right there.
Elation. We're rushing the court.
They're not rushing the court, Vince. What happened?
No, that was a, well, hey, the basketball team has not had a good year. Right?
We needed this.
So I don't want to pretend like they did. But that was fun. That was fun.
Listen, it's always fun to beat your rivals when they brag, and Miami sure does love to throw up the U and pump the chest and everything. And hey, listen, the baseball team is doing some things, so we're back on the baseball diamond.
Yeah, the baseball team. For those of you that are maybe not following it, new coach Link Jarrett, who was a Florida State player, shortstop, I believe is shortstop, maybe second baseman. My brain's getting old, Garnet and Old. But he's the coach now, and he's well known as he's gone through the coaching ranks with overachieving depending on the talent that he had. And now he's at his alma mater where he's going to be able to get the talent he probably always wanted, because Florida State is a destination in terms of baseball. So they went out and had a weekend series against TCU, who was currently ranked as number 8, and they won that series 2-1. So already looking pretty good on the baseball side. So while while we're crying a little bit about basketball, we can revel in the baseball a little bit.
And to remind everyone, since we're doing a live show every Tuesday, so mark your calendars at 7 p.m. Next Tuesday, Vince, spring practice would have started.
Yes, spring practice starts. Which date? What's
Monday.
The date, Ryan? Monday. Okay, yeah. So we'll have some information about that. Actually, they're having a kickoff luncheon this week, I believe, and so we'll be getting a lot of detail from our folks that we listen to. One of them you heard a little earlier in the show. But remember, we have no inside info and no contacts.
Yeah, we almost have to put an X, like a slash for the no contacts, because now we have a few contacts.
Right. Okay. So maybe it's a little bit of hedging our bets there a little bit, but yeah. So
and what if we get media availability for the season, Vince, and we get credentials? Then we have to scratch out inside info and contacts and put, yes, we have a problem.
I would love that. One of us would have to, they'd have to have a high-speed rail back to Tallahassee.
Yeah.
But
can we get that done?
Cool. Maybe. Michael Alford could probably get it done.
The CEO of Spanx, come on, get on it. Let's get that rail.
And then the spring game, Ryan, right? So when you talk about the spring game, you and I are planning to be there. That's not changed, right?
Without our families, just by chance. The weekend that we are going, my wife is out of town. I believe your family's out of town. So it's going to be a boys' trip, right?
It is. My family is going to see Taylor Swift.
My wife will be on a cruise.
And so Ryan and I will be there at the spring game. But, back to the beginning of the show, Ryan. And that is, I wanted to bring up again, Ryan and I, very happy to be kicking off this year. And it is our intent to go full bore weekly. And we would really appreciate those of you that are here all the time. Spread the word, share, like, subscribe, do all the social media things you're supposed to do to help spread the word about this. We would really, really appreciate it.
And if you know anyone who would like to sponsor the Garnet and Old Show, holler at your boy.
We're looking at that too.
You know what? More info to come on that live show. Just imagine September comes, you're hanging out at a local bar and grill in Jacksonville, watching Florida State kick some ass on an away game. with your favorite co-hosts of the Garnet and Old Show. What could be better? What could be better?
Doing a live show. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. So, Ryan, it's been a great show. Aside from the echo at the beginning, but hey,
Yeah, it's been fun. Just simple.
it's been simple. Just simple to do. And remember, we will be back next Tuesday at 7 p.m. This has been Garnet and Old Show.
Go Knowles.
No inside info, no contacts, no problem.
Have a great
Go
night, everyone.
Knowles.